We had the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Now, this relates to when he was a UK trade envoy. And the allegations are that he was using classified information, privileged information, to tip off people like Jeffrey Epstein, possibly in return for financial favours. His properties, the royal residences, have been scoured by police detectives. And so we wait to see what happens next. Will he be charged? Will there be a court case? Could there be a custodial sentence? Meanwhile, Peter Mandelson, the former US ambassador, was also arrested, and his homes were also scoured by police.
The Epstein scandal is having the biggest splash in the UK. What will the impact be on the long term? This is Interference. So yeah, Alex, the Epstein case has had a huge impact in Europe and especially in the UK, where something special happened with both the royal family and then also with the former minister. Can you explain how big the impact has been?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? In America, no arrests have been made, but of course they're looking at allegations for sexual offences. Here in the United Kingdom, it is a huge political quagmire. So first of all, you had the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Now, this relates to when he was a UK trade envoy. And the allegations are from some of the emails that have been released that he was using classified information, privileged information, knowing when certain government policies might be made, the doors that he was able to open or was present, at least when they were opening because of his position, to tip off people like Jeffrey Epstein, possibly in return for financial favours. So that's being looked into. His properties, the royal residences, have been scoured by police detectives, and so we wait to see what happens next. Will he be charged? Will there be a court case? Could there be a custodial sentence? Meanwhile, Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, the former US ambassador, but also, of course, a very senior figure in especially the Blairite political party of the Labour Party, was also arrested, and his homes were also scoured by police. 2 properties in Wiltshire, 1 in London in Camden. And he's been released this morning. He's been seen going back to his residence in Camden. Again, he has not been charged with an offence yet, but police are gathering evidence to see whether there are grounds to make a charge. Now, he says that nothing he did was for financial gain, that he professes his innocence, that nothing he had done was criminal. But now what's happened is there's an opposition day debate going on in Parliament, which means the parties that aren't the government parties get to put forward things that they want to be scrutinised by Parliament. And they're now asking for the appointment of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor as UK trade envoy. That was under the David Cameron government going back 10, 15 years ago. They want that to be scrutinised and the paperwork to be released. Meanwhile, there is pressure on the government to publish paperwork relating to the appointment of Lord Mandelson, because what we've learned as well is he also had a pretty dubious lobbying firm that appeared to work with entities in China at the very least. So a big mess over here in the United Kingdom, all politically related. Whether or not we then see something else emerge relating to possible sex trafficking offences, that'd be more related to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, I don't know. But some people are saying that this could be big enough, especially regarding Peter Mandelson, to bring down the Starmer government. Starmer professing to not know anything, saying that due process was always followed, that it would be other people's mistakes or lack of thoroughness that has led to Mandelson's appointment and some of these glaring oversights. But I just have a feeling the narrative's going to run a lot deeper.
But speaking of lack of oversight, how is it possible that we have the investigation now? Don't the British have a secret service? Don't they scrutinize people? Don't they vet people? What happened there?
This is a big question, because the intelligence agencies have basically come out already and said, we told you not to make this appointment. Starmer said, well, the intelligence agencies gave me the go clear, although there might have been a warning on it. So the question of what was scrutinised, was it thoroughly scrutinised? What was said to the Prime Minister when he made his decision, and the chronology of all of this? Because, of course, if it turned out that the appointment was made and then later on the intelligence agencies gave a tip-off, that would be a different kettle of fish, some might say. But what it looks like, certainly, is that everyone knew Lord Mandelson was a dodgy character. His nickname in the Labour Party was the Dark Prince. Everyone knew that he had had a strange business dealings. People knew that he was in contact with Epstein, that they had maintained a friendship, even after the incarceration, then release of Jeffrey Epstein on child sex trafficking charges. And so it looked like a pretty strange appointment to begin with. But what it unearths is this network below the surface of the Labour Party, which stretches back to Tony Blair's years, where certain bigwigs, certain key influential figures seem to run everything within the party and pick and choose who they want in the most senior positions. And this also, believe it or not, then interconnects with another political scandal we've got going on, which is that of the giveaway of the Chagos Islands. Now, these are British overseas territories, which for the longest time have been used to house a big US-UK airbase, Diego Garcia. They're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. They are about 1,000 kilometers away from Mauritius, but a strange deal was done to essentially hand the territory of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius based upon some loose and flimsy decolonization instruction, which was drawn up by a barrister who's a good friend of the Prime Minister, who got Mauritian citizenship, who was part of an £8.3 million payouts for organising this. There's allegations that he worked in lockstep with the Chinese in securing this particular piece of instruction, it's legal guidance rather than an exact order. And so then the question is, was Mandelson part of this as well? Because it'd be in Chinese interest that America doesn't have an airbase on Diego Garcia, or that the British don't run it, because the Chinese are very close to Mauritius. And this would give them abilities, essentially, to listen in or to build infrastructure up and around what is a critical airbase, which essentially works to launch particular missions over as far as China and into the Middle East. In fact, it could be used in coming days, if not weeks, for America to launch an offensive against Iran. But this all interconnects back to Mandelson. What did he know? Who were his friends? Was he in the pocket of foreign influence? Big questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, it sounds like a very big can of worms. But wasn't the Chagos Islands also something that was promoted under the Conservative government?
Yeah, so the legal instruction was made by a guy called Philipps and this was during the time of the Conservative government. Now, apparently David Cameron had worked very hard to try and hold this back, to suppress it, to quell it, to try and get rid of it, to buy time, to try and make sure that it didn't actually ever get affected. And it's been put on fast forward since the Labour Party came into power. So people are asking questions about Philipps Sands, whose friendship with Keir Starmer goes back years. They work in, they've got a network of the similar barristers' chambers, which all work in favour of human rights. With another guy called Richard Hermer, who was appointed as the Attorney General, made a law so he could go and sit in the second chamber so that appointment could be made, the very first unelected Attorney General in over a century. But that is the highest legal office in the land. Now, people are saying there's this cartel of lawyers, including Starmer himself, who don't seem to ever put the British interest first. Some of the cases that these lawyers have worked on, and some of them pro bono, are breathtaking. We're talking about the prosecution of UK soldiers for activities in the theatre of war during the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. One particular soldier was arrested and investigated 3 times and cleared every time. And the lawyer behind that was Sir Keir Starmer, also representing known terrorists, people fighting for release from Guantanamo Bay. When you look at the roll call, including, of course, as well, the IRA, the paramilitary force that caused years of pain and suffering in Northern Ireland. So when you look at some of the cases that this network of human rights lawyers have taken upon themselves to fight over the course of decades now, it is all too often against the UK state itself, but also against UK interests. And these people find themselves at the very heart of the UK government, at the very heart of the Chagos Islands scandal. And it's now drawing that connection between Lord Mandelson, his lobbying firm, the Chinese government, and the Chagos Islands, and this case, and Jeffrey Epstein. So it's a sort of constellation. Perhaps things don't all fit together. Perhaps they're interrelated, but it is very murky indeed.
Is this also then the reason why in the UK there are so many people pointing towards the role of the Russians? Because if you look at the popular conversation on the internet and with people in general, everybody points at Israel, points at secret services, points at the World Economic Forum and all kind of international institutions that are heavily infiltrated by like the Epstein network. But everything you say seems to be like a very, very different angle, although it's also very tangible as well. So is that then the Russian thing or is that something else?
Well, this is the big question, isn't it? I mean, who was Jeffrey Epstein's client? Was it the Russian state? Was it the Chinese state? Was it independent, wealthy individuals? Was he working for a number of people, essentially finding access, collecting compromat, charming people in order to get ahead with access to vital information that shouldn't have been shared with him? And so there's a lot of noise about quite who is inculcated, why, what the interests were. Certainly surrounding Mandelson at this stage, it is the Chinese, but the word Russia has come up as well. The suggestion is that the court ruling that suggested that the UK should give the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, based upon this idea of decolonisation, was drawn up, having been approved by both the Kremlin and the CCP, who have vested interests when it comes to the acquisition and maintenance of certain territories. Russia wouldn't want any sort of international legal advisory to suggest he would have to give up Crimea. China wouldn't want any sort of template for an international legal advisory to suggest that they could make no claim on Taiwan. And so it is suggested that when this legal advisory was drawn up, it was done with their know-how, with their approval, which is why it sort of went down what people would call woke grounds of talking about decolonisation instead. So I think there's a lot more to this. This is sort of the beginning of the opening of a Pandora's box. And what else comes out of there is going to be critical of the survival of the current UK government over the coming weeks and months.
But if you speak about interest and national interest and all kind of interest, then isn't the royal family the institution par excellence of national interest? And there in the UK, you have the case of Mr. Mountbatten-Windsor, I have to say now, who did like treason, betrayal of the national interest. Is that damaging the royal family as well? Is republicanism on the rise in the UK now, or how will we see evolution in that angle?
It's interesting. People are saying that it's a very hard time for the royal family. Prince William, who of course is the future king, attended the BAFTAs the other day and said on camera it was a very difficult time. He was very stressed about everything. There's been minimal lines coming out of the royal family. They've continued to get on doing their daily work, putting a brave face on things. They have echoed the principle that nobody is above the law, and they fully support the police in their investigations. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been kicked out of one royal residence, sort of excommunicated, ostracised into a much smaller property on the bigger and more remote estate of Sandringham in Norfolk, away from the Windsor Great Park, where he was all taught and seen riding around on horses and waving to the public amidst all this furore. But I think the dividing lines as people who support having a monarchy and those who don't have remained intact. I don't think there's been a groundswell towards people saying, well, let's abolish the monarchy. I think people understand that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is a bad apple. There's conversations about him being removed from the line of succession. Those conversations are happening in Australia as well as in the United Kingdom. It would take an act of parliament to make sure that that is the case. This means, of course, if a significant number of royals before him all happen to meet an unfortunate early demise, he could end up being king, therefore head of state. It would be more performative. That is unlikely to happen given where he is in line to the throne. But then some of the other questions surrounding this, I suppose, is what did the palaces themselves know? We've seen from the Megxit scandal, when Harry and Meghan left to go to America, the courtiers tend to exchange messages with each other rather than relatives. But then it does shine a light as well on the late Queen, because it's understood that she might have been the one to pay the £12 million out of court settlement to Virginia Giuffre, the late Virginia Giuffre, who accused Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor of being trafficked for his purposes to the UK by Jeffrey Epstein, something that he has always denied. Now, she is obviously no longer with us. So whether that will ever be resolved, I do not know. But it would appear that the late Queen may, at least in part, have contributed into an out-of-court settlement. And whether that's to protect her son, whether it's to protect the institutions, whether it's out of sympathy with Giuffre, it's certainly an uncomfortable thing for the British people to learn, because, you know, to us, the late Queen really was the glue that held us together. I think in the coming 12 months, the royal family face a lot of challenges. From what I understand, there are already active plans for a state funeral and another coronation, possibly within the next 12 months. I don't know how true that is. No one really knows the state of the King's health. We know he's still fighting cancer, but he's going about performing duties. But it's a very difficult time for the royal family, for certain. But I don't think it is actually leading to people wanting to see the monarchy abolished. But certainly big questions are being asked.
But if that amount of money could be given to Geoffrey for the allegations, why would you be corrupt then? Because if you look at the amounts of money, even also by Mandelson, it's actually fairly limited amounts that being reported on. So is it a money thing? Is it a greed thing? Or is it a sex offender thing?
These are the big questions. Was this all happening due to financial gain? Was it because Jeffrey Epstein was just so charismatic, people became beholden and befixed and bewitched by him that they wanted to sort of give him all this information, whatever risk it brought themselves? Was it perhaps it was in an era before things like WhatsApp groups, where people thought that, you know, doing these sorts of things on the side may never be unearthed, may never be discovered? Because it does at the moment seem as if there is a limited amount of money involved when it comes to Mandelson. The sort of figures we're hearing, things like £50,000, $75,000 in that region, payments that Mandelson says he cannot remember being made. But he does seem to have been along the entire, circuitous scandal of Epstein, constantly by his side, there to help, there to advise, wanting to go along and participate in events on Epstein's Island. So quite what's going on here, whether this was for money's sake or for sexual misdemeanor or simply friendship, we don't really know at this stage. And with Epstein out of the picture, perhaps we will never know.
Something else maybe, and I'm wondering if you're like happy or sad with it, but it looks like it goes, the entire Epstein case is about the rich and famous, the powerful, the elite, and then we see that the European Union, the European Commission, has nobody in the Epstein files. So should we be happy with it, that the European Union is irrelevant, or should we be sad about it?
Yeah, interesting question, actually. But you're right in saying that a lot of big known names that feature in the Epstein files, there are those who went to the island, those who have events with him. It's just sort of coincidental. It's consequences they're in the same place at the same time. Then there are those who built up what seems like a close relationship with him. And you're right, there aren't many European Union figures that feature there. But we do know about European Union figures that the Commission itself operates in a dark way. You know, you've got 30,000 corporate lobbyists over in Brussels who deal directly with the European Commission, not with the elected members of the European Parliament, who are the ones who have to publish their financial interests, their second jobs, their board directorships publicly. The European Commission don't come under the same level of scrutiny. So whether or not there might be people related to those files, they're not household names anyway. But you are right in saying that everybody who's anybody seems to be in those Epstein files for various reasons on a sliding scale, but not so many Europeans inculcated.
Another particular thing is when you read the emails, the people that rule over us, or overlords, they don't seem particularly intelligent. You see them making mistakes, you see them making very crude remarks, you see them being racist, you see them being sexist, you see them being simple, you see them being greedy. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, that's politics for you, isn't it? I mean, when you look at the nature of politicians today, we have this sort of wistful idea of politicians of the past, the sort of era of Churchills, of great men with great principle and great moral authority, whereas now we just seem to have a rabble of incompetents who aren't suited whatsoever to service, let's say, to duty. People who might be ambitious, people who have networked hard, people who have been loyal to a particular party or particular entity, getting places due to that, rather than it being a meritocracy. So it does sort of reflect, I think, on our political class today. But whether we ever had it better in the past, I don't know.
But knowing that the people are who they are and have their lewd ways of living, and having all that power, do you trust the system to take care of the system then? Because you have a little bit of judge and jury situation where in the end it will be politicians and the representative of our institutions that will have to clean house, but they are implicit in it, so implicated in it. I'm sorry. So how do we move on that? How can we restore the trust between the people and the people that govern us?
Well, the question is, can trust ever be restored to politics? Because we live in a digital age now where headlines that happen on X at a very fast rate. You know, someone posted something unfortunate about 10 years ago and it's dug up and everyone wonders whether or not this was a scandal, whether certain language has been used. We've had plenty of political scandals under this Labour government in the United Kingdom. The former Deputy Prime Minister being sacked from her position as Housing Minister because she bought a second home far away from her constituency to go and live in, seemed to have told untruths about what her primary residence was in order to avoid paying tax on that second home. She might be coming back into office. But, you know, we live in a world now where everything is all the time dragged up and treated as a scandal, treated as sort of this synthetic archaeological offence, things that people might have said in a previous article, in a previous interview that's now deemed politically incorrect. And there's so much noise out there. It's hard to know whether politics was always like this, but we just weren't as well informed because we didn't have fast-paced 24-hour interactive social media, or whether something has happened to politics in the latter day. But also, it's worth pointing this out. The noise about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is incredibly useful to Sir Keir Starmer. It is a day that we're not talking about his government, his culpability, his complicity in some of these scandals and some of these affairs. I mean, in the UK, we've just had a big noise about someone with Tourette's shouting a deeply offensive word at an awards ceremony. And so we've spent 2 days talking about that deeply offensive word, which is used in rap music, and whether the black actors who were on stage at the time need to be publicly apologised to. It's a nonsense. It's a nothingness when we've got big, serious issues facing the country right now. But I think that in the world we live in today, this sort of constant doom scroll of scandal is the energy that keeps publishing companies alive. It's also the energy that keeps us addicted to our phones, but it's also the energy that is used by political spin offices to distract, to try and divert attention away from the areas we should be looking.
So how do we fix it? Is it? Are you saying that we need to talk about something else? That I'm wrong by talking to you about that, or should we? What should we do?
Oh, gosh, I don't know what we should do, but if the European Union had its way, they would close down X, that's for sure. That is something they have been pushing towards for a long time. It's interesting to see America apparently setting up some sort of free speech portal, a sort of American-based VPN that people will be able to log into if European governments do start closing down certain platforms. Certainly, they would like to see a restriction in the spread of information. Those of us on the right wing tend to think that it's democratizing having access to more real-time revelation. So how this plays out in the long run, we do know that there are governments across the West agitating to restrict, control and regulate social media, particularly the platform X. And any number of things could at any point be swooped upon as an excuse in order to do that.
Okay, so the pedophiles will keep us quiet then, is the conclusion. That's a bit dark.
That's very dark. No, in fact, it was a while ago, the European Union were using the argument of pedophiles using Grok to try and close down X. So who knows how this is going to play out. But there's vested interests all over the place. And, you know, politics, I've worked in politics all around the world. And I think most politics, because of the nature of what it is, power, money, control, position, access, always invites scandal, always invites corruption. There are some countries where endemic corruption is very severe, but I'd say corruption probably exists in all countries, in all governments, in all political parties. It's just how sophisticated it is, how covered up it is, and how prominent it is. But what we're beginning to learn in the UK is certainly there are things that have taken place with the senior figures in the Labour Party that raise some very serious questions. The government's approval rating has never been lower. The Prime Minister's approval rating is one of the lowest among any Prime Minister on record. And so, and as you've seen in recent years, we've had a habit of replacing our Prime Minister. We've become Italy, basically. We just replace our Prime Minister every few minutes at the moment. So the question is whether or not Starmer will last. If Starmer has to fall on his sword, whether the Labour government will last. Certainly Reform UK, the party surging in the polls right now in the United Kingdom, seem to think a general election could happen sooner rather than later. That would favour them for sure. But we live in really strange times. You know, there's certain governments which seem to have held it together in Europe in this new world we live in. Giorgia Meloni's doing fairly well. She hasn't been unseated yet. But we've seen political crisis hit a lot of countries in Europe, from the UK to the Netherlands. And we just live in very, very different political times.
That's true. And maybe concluding, in those times, it proves that sunlight might be the best disinfectant, and that's how we can combat corruption. And maybe that's the role of the media in these days. So anyway,
Yeah.
Alex, thank you for coming. And let's close this down and let's talk another time.
All right.